Okay. So, good evening, everybody. This is the hustings for the candidates in the general election for 2024. We are South Leeds Life and we host the hustings here in South Leeds. Just remember, we have a newspaper that you can sponsor and subscribe. Feel free to put questions in the chat box, which is at the bottom if you're watching. And we will make sure that we ask all the candidates in different orders. Sorry. And now we will start. So I'm going to go first with Karen.
Hello.
So Karen, if you'd like to take 2 minutes. Hello. If you'd like to take 2 minutes to tell us about yourself.
I would love to. Hello, South Leeds. Very lovely to be representing the Conservative Party in your great city. I am from London, as you may imagine from my accent. However, I am the proud mother of 2 sons who have a Leeds-born father and whose second team, I'm afraid, is Leeds United, because their first team's Arsenal, where they were born. Working class girl, dad was an electrician, mum was a bookkeeper. I'm first in my family to go to university, planning and housing lawyer, passionate about housing and affordable housing, really want to see secure defence and a really strong education element in our country. Very proud of the Conservative record on bringing our kids up to 4th in the world for reading and 7th in the world for maths. I had a great state education. I believe it's really, really important that we give everybody a great state education. And I believe in low taxes, but that means I think that people who are on low incomes should not be paying tax. We should be supporting people on low incomes, encouraging people into work. And I believe that the biggest problem with the NHS is the great amount of waste that goes on, as told to me by a junior striking doctor. Very, very pleased to meet all of my opponents this evening and looking forward to our debate.
Thank you, Karen. Hilary, would you like to go next?
Well, thank you very much, Christine. Can I thank, first of all, South Leeds Life for what you do in being a fantastic community newspaper and website, and for organising this hustings. I'm sorry to say it's the only hustings that's been organised in South Leeds during this general election campaign. I have been the Member of Parliament covering South Leeds since 1999. It has been and is an extraordinary privilege to be a Member of Parliament. I've tried to be a voice for the community. I have campaigned for things that people feel passionate about, as do I. And I have helped literally thousands of people with their problems, because I do think that part of a Member of Parliament's job is to help people when they're in difficulty, because MPs have a voice and we can use that voice to speak up on behalf of other people. I think this is a very important election. And I say it for this reason. I've spent a lot of time in the last 4 weeks travelling around the country, also around the constituency. I think most people feel it is time for a change. The question is, what kind of change? And Labour has a plan, stability. If we're going to tackle the waiting list, we've got to make a start somewhere. So 40,000 more appointments a week at evenings and weekends to begin to get the waiting list down would help. Creating Great British Energy, because people have been suffering terribly from energy bills. More police and PCSOs on our streets to deal with antisocial behaviour, which I know from my experience as your MP, some people suffer from, and it makes their lives a misery. And free breakfast clubs in every primary school. Children can't learn if they're hungry, and there's a great deal of poverty. And I was in a food pantry earlier today in East Leeds, it so happens, which is part of the constituency. And all I would say is that if you feel watching this that you want change to happen, then on the 4th of July, you have the chance to vote for it. I hope you'll take the opportunity. I really hope you're going to vote, whoever you vote for amongst the candidates here tonight. Our democracy matters and we should play a part in it. And that means turning up and making your choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, you're next, please.
Hello, everybody. My name's Daniel Whetstone. I'm the Social Democratic Party candidate for this general election. I've been a resident of South Leeds for nearly 15 years now. I volunteer at a few organisations, a local sports club. I've supported some mental health organisations. I work with children with special needs, special educational needs. So I see firsthand and understand a lot of what's going on within education, some of the reform that needs to be held. Many of you may recognise me from the local elections. I've been heavily involved in a lot of what the SDP has done in South Leeds. And it's a great honour and it's a privilege to be here today. I have to mirror what Hilary has just said. This is the only hustings that anyone's contacted me about, and I think it's a little bit of a shame that in South Leeds we haven't been able to access the public in a more organised manner. But it is what it is, and we're all here today, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. There's lots of things that we can do. There's lots of things we'd like to do, and because I live here, I see and I understand what a lot of the public are going through as well, because they're my shared experiences. And it'd be a great honour and a privilege to represent the people of South Leeds, given the opportunity.
Thank you, Daniel. Ed, please, you're next.
Yeah, good evening all. So my name's Ed Carlisle. I live in Beeston with my family and have done for the last 20 or so years. And it's been a privilege living here. I love South Leeds. It's brilliant. We have plenty of challenges, but it's it's a great community. For most of the last 20 years, just been involved in lots of community action and events and projects, and just lots of stuff with a wide range of people, and wasn't particularly engaged in politics for most of that time, but felt that our communities deserved better representation, and so in the last few years started standing in the local elections and for the Green Party, and it was a massive privilege to be elected as one of the councillors for Hunslet and Riverside in 2022. So I'm one of the sitting councillors, and also stood in the parliamentary elections previously as well for this area. I think I think a big thing we're all seeing is society feels like it's in a mess at the moment. Like I have heartbreaking conversations with people most days, I'd say, just kind of suffering really difficult situations, and I'm sure we'll touch upon a lot of them tonight. And I think there is a real hunger for change. I think the question is what kind of change. I think we need really deep systemic change, to be honest. I think we need transformation across a wide range of sectors. And even if that will take a long time, I think we need to set that trajectory towards trying to create a very different society, one that's fairer, one that is stronger, one that's happier, healthier. Our political landscape has been dominated for too long, I think, by two big parties. This particular local area, South Leeds, has been dominated for a very long time by one party. I think we really need more plural voices. We need a more plural political landscape. I'm really proud to be with the Green Party and proud to be offering a positive alternative in this and other elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Daryl, I'll take you next.
Thank you. Yes. For Christian People's Alliance, I'm standing in for Janet Bickerdike. So I'll give you a little bit about me and then more on the party. I've been not involved in politics, and I have lived in the transgender sector for 8 years. I lived as a woman. So I understand a lot about that, but I've pulled back from it, and I'm not happy with the way the schools have got an LGBTQ plus agenda that is pushing things onto smaller children. They shouldn't be in the schools doing this. What people do when they're older, that's fine, but keep it out of schools. Also, for the CPA, we're friendly with business, but we want it to be fair. Now, the biggest companies in the world come into this country and pay no tax, likes of Google, Amazon, Microsoft. They don't pay any tax here. So we would introduce a 5% turnover tax, and this would raise about £40 billion to help with the unemployment, the people in prisons coming out. A lot of reforms that can be made, because we need to be honest about what's happening in our society. We've been railroaded by a worldwide agenda. And if you can't see that, the simple point when people say, what is a woman? At Christian People's Alliance, we're very much aware of what God made. He made man, he made woman, and said multiply. So it's very simple. A woman never has had and never will have a penis. And I think when people start talking the truth and stopping all of this rubbish that's going on, we'll be able to get down to some politics and some policies that are going to help the people of this country. I've been here 25 years, and I have watched this country go in an Islamic way. They're just wanting to take over. And I say the Christian core of this country needs to stand up and say enough is enough. Grandparents went to war to stop this being taken over by Germans. Well, we should stand up and say this is a Christian principled country, and that's the way it's going to stay. If anyone wants to come to this country like I did 25 years ago, I'm to integrate into it, not to separate and try and change it. That aside, our policies, we really do want to help people integrate back into society from prisons. And that's where the turnover tax will come in and help those people get a job and be supported. There's lots of other policies we've got, but they'll probably come up. Our main thing that's different from the other parties is we support Israel, because the history of Israel is from the Ottoman Empire. Britain and France took it over in World War I, and people don't know their history. And when you lose in a war, you don't have rights to it. So in 1948 and 1967 and 1973, the Islamists had a war with Israel and they lost. But they're very blessed for being allowed on the land. And Israel keeps giving land back to them for peace, and they never get peace. So I'll hand it back. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you, Darryl. George.
Hello, everyone. My name is George. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Leeds South. First off, a huge thanks to South Leeds Life for hosting this. I have the dubious honour of being agent for several other Leeds constituencies, and overseeing the whole of our agenting process. And surprised to say, unfortunately, not every constituency has even one Hustings, let alone a wonderful newspaper like South Leeds Life, because actually many communities don't actually have any sort of community news at all. And that's a really big issue, of course, that the Liberal Democrats handily have a plan for solving by investing more in local news areas. Why am I standing for the Liberal Democrats? I'm standing because I believe the Liberal Democrats offer a fairer deal for our country and offer a fairer deal for people who live here. I am particularly fond of our stance on LGBT plus rights, on our strong support for trans people. Unlike my dear colleague here, Darryl, I do think that we should teach about gender identity in schools. That's also something Labour don't think we should do. Labour do think that we should instigate some sort of Section 28 version 2 to ban teaching of gender identities in school. So I totally disagree. I think that, we need to be progressive. We need to teach about LGBT plus rights in schools, and we need to ensure that children are finding out from good factual sources from their teachers and not through misinformation on the internet, to ensure that, they're hearing current facts. I'm also really fond of our plans about building housing. I think housing is one of the major issues, especially for young people in our society at the moment. Quite simply, housing at the moment is too expensive. It's too expensive to rent and it's too expensive to buy. And many of the properties people do end up renting are mouldy, damp and unfit to live in. And that's just unacceptable. The solution to this is to reform the rental sector and to simply build more houses, because by building houses, you will bring the cost of housing overall down. I'm really fond of the Liberal Democrat policies, and I look forward to explaining as many of them as I can to you all tonight. Once again, thanks for coming.
Thank you, George. Okay, so now we're on to the questions. So I think I'll go with Daryl first, if that's okay.
Yes, that's okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, so the first question is, SEND education has many issues. Schools not being able to cope with children's needs, cuts to funding, and children without IEPs. What will your party do to improve any of these issues, and why do you think it has gotten so bad? Daryl.
Well, when it comes to the schools, like I said, there is a lot of funding being allocated in the wrong places. And I think I've missed the question a little bit.
Sorry,
repeat
so
the question for me, though.
Sorry, Daryl. Do you want me to say it again?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So SEND education, special education needs education, has got many issues.
Yes.
Schools are not able to cope with children's needs, cuts to the funding, and children without IEPs, education plans, that is. What will your party to improve any of these things, and why do you think it has gone so bad?
Well, I think one of the problems where it's gone so bad is the quangos that got set up. There's a lot of money being spent on these quangos, and that money is not getting down to the bottom. Now, we're talking about raising money from these international companies, and that gives us a lot of money that we can then put down on the ground floor. Quangos don't get onto the ground. That's all in administration and people pushing paper. I think that's one of the main things that we need to sort out. There's a lot of money. We're talking £100 million. We're talking money that can move things. So on that basis, the quangos need sorting out. Indeed.
Music, Christine.
Indeed.
I'm muted, I know. Sorry, Daryl. I said, and do you have any ideas to why you think it's gotten so bad?
Well, I think they've just got railroaded. There seems to be, from the people I've spoken to and the parents I've spoken to, there seems to be a disconnect between the children and the parents and the schools. I've spoken to a mother and she's got two teenagers, the twins, and she doesn't seem to get the responses from the school. She asks questions and they buffer off. That's how she feels. So I offered to I'll go with her to the school, and we'll try and get the answers that she wants.
Okay, thank you. I will ask that next to Daniel. But you're muted, Daniel.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so special educational needs. Firstly, it's in the position it's in because there has been an erosion of funding over a long period of time. There has been an indifference towards special needs education. And sadly, it seems to be when there are any cuts, it does seem to be that special education takes the first hit. And that is how it's ended up where it is, really. There's been a lack of funding has led to a lack of provision, which has led to a lack of training and understanding. And now there are too many students going into mainstream schools, and the schools, unfortunately, are not equipped to deal with them properly, which is not fair on the other students, and it's very disruptive to learning, and it's not suitable at all. What we need to do is, it needs the reinvestment. We need to develop more silks within the city, and a silk is a special inclusive learning centre. We need to develop more silks. We have some. There's Broomfield's one in Middleton. There's an East Silk, a West Silk, a North West Silk. We do have them in the city, but we don't have enough provision. I worked with a little boy who finally got an EHCP, and they told him it took 2 years to get it, and it would be a further 2 years before he was able to access specialist provision. That is not helping that child. That is not helping the other schools around. So what we need to do is we need to invest in more actual provision. We need to invest in training members of staff so they understand and they know what they're dealing with and they're able to help these children at a better level. We also need to streamline the EHCP system. The Educational Health Care Plan is a legally binding document, and it's not a simple document. It's not an easy document to achieve, but it's a very, very difficult document to get at the moment, and it's far, far too time consuming. So when you have a child that is struggling, they have to go through so much bureaucracy and so much red tape for the parents. Parents, obviously, they won't be very au fait with much of this because it won't be something they've experienced before, and it just takes too long. And the longer it takes, obviously, it's detrimental to the child and often to the families on a whole. So we need to streamline that. And also, we need to identify within the students a difference between a student that has a learning difficulty and a student that is suffering from poor mental health and low esteem. And both can be equally difficult to deal with and to support, but there are different reasons and there are different approaches that need to be taken with each. And being able to identify these things better and sooner will only help the system, and it will only help the children and the families. And it's unfortunately there are no overnight solutions, but there is an obvious and a long-term failing within the system that can be addressed. And we do need to be addressing this because we're getting better and better at identifying special educational needs, and we are getting more and more students with educational needs.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. George, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I personally am autistic and I have dyslexia as well. But essentially, I have a lot of experience with the special educational needs system and with how students are treated for it, how they get diagnosed, and how after education as well, how universities treat them, and how employers treat them as well. And I think it's really important that we put pupils first and right at the centre of our plans on this to ensure that they, are the centre of the deals that we're making here. In terms of what we're actually going to do as the Liberal Democrats, we would give local authorities extra funding, and this would enable them to ensure that they can actually follow through on the education, health and care plan of each individual student, which really enables us to tailor each student's educational requirements to the specific needs that they have. And we would also establish a new national body for SEND to support children with very highly specialised needs who need more support and more care. The Liberal Democrats also have extensive plans on caring in general to support people who care for children with special needs, including introducing carers' minimum wage, £2 higher than the national level of minimum wage. And because, we really need to ensure that not only the students themselves are supported, but also the people who support the students to ensure that they get the best care, so that they can then achieve the best possible outcomes in life, which after all is what all special educational needs education is all about.
Thank you, George. I'm going to ask Ed next, please. Same question.
Inevitably, in echoing some of what others have said, I mean, part of the issue is funding. The current government over the last 13, 14 years have taken kind of brutal cuts across many sectors, including this one. The Greens are committed to a £5 billion investment specifically into special educational needs education. And somewhat echoing what our colleague from the Christian Alliance was saying, like, actually there are big opportunities to be made with regards to kind of raising extra tax on the super wealthy, tax on big business. So sometimes big figures get thrown around, but actually there is extra tax to be made from taxing the super wealthy to enable things like that to be funded. Like George, we believe absolutely in raising taxes. Raising wages. The Greens are committed to a £15 minimum wage to enable people in these kind of jobs carrying professions, social care, etc., to be along with everyone else to be well paid. I think So I'm involved in I work with some of the schools locally, and I'm involved in something called the Jest Cluster, which works across many of the local schools. I think part of the issue as well is the essential privatisation of the education system, the academisation of large swathes of education, which has created a somewhat disjointed system. We as the Greens are very much looking to bring things back into public hands, wanting to make systems locally led but more integrated. So I think certainly things like this would benefit from better collaboration, better communication across the education sector. I also think that, I mean, this might be controversial, but I think the education system is overly regulated in many ways, and the Greens would look for alternatives to Ofsted, in order to just, like, I'm sure you all know teachers, I know people who work in schools, and the administrative weight upon them is considerable, and we need to rethink education to create something that is more, I suppose, more human, more people-centered, more relationship-centered, and perhaps less system-centered. And I guess partly it is as well, it's about wanting to just really empower campaign bodies and groups to really champion things like this. So just today I was over in Richmond Hill with a charity over there called the Affinity Trust, who work not with children but with adults with special educational needs, and they were saying that, and maybe many other people would say this as well, but I think they would say, what the field we're working in is, it's not sexy, it's not that kind of exciting, so actually we're the ones that kind of constantly kind of get missed out, because it's it's a smaller group of people, and so wanting to really ensure that the voluntary and community sector, the charity sector, is well funded in order to fight hard for people with special educational needs.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Hilary, I'll go to you next, please.
To come to the second part of the question first, why has there been this increase? I mean, I agree with Daniel that there's more identification now, and conditions that in the past people would not have known about or heard of are now being identified. Parents are waiting for a diagnosis. Part of the reason for that is the great pressure on local authorities. I agree what's been said about the impact of spending cuts and the effect that has on drawing up EHCPs. And I would just make the point to Darryl that what some people describe as, paper pushers in a local authority, well, the people in the local authority who are trying to prepare EHCPs are doing a really important administrative job that parents and children are relying upon. So we have to be really careful when we use these terms, paper pushers and bureaucracy, because I've met plenty of parents who come to seek my assistance because they've been waiting a long time for EHCPs, because there have been resource problems, and there has been a bit of a difficulty in Leeds, which the council itself has identified. I think the second point, I agree very much with what's been said about poor mental health. One has to reflect on the impact that COVID had on children. Now, this was a really difficult decision because do you close the schools or not? And the argument went, well, if children go to school and get the virus, bring it back home, give it to grandma who gets extremely ill and dies. Governments would have been criticised for not closing the schools, but we also recognised that there was an impact on the education that was missed out. And you look at the figures nationally as well as locally, the level of non-attendance has about doubled since COVID, children not wanting to go back to school. It's really important that every child attends school in order to be able to benefit most from what teachers have to offer. I agree with what's been said about the importance of silks, some very good silks in Leeds, but I do know that there are some children whose needs are so complex that it's very, very hard to find the provision. And it then comes back to the question of funding. How is this going to be paid for, given the problems that local authorities face? Now, a theme, I'm sure, of tonight's discussion will be, the easiest thing is to sit here as a candidate and say, I promise to spend on this, I promise to spend on that, I promise to spend on the other. The question is, where is the money going to come from? And we as a party have been very clear that the commitments we make about the first steps are ones where we can identify the funding. And the second thing we've said is what will really make a difference on many of the issues we'll talk about tonight is if we can get the economy growing. Because if the economy grows, the government gets more tax revenue, and we're in a better position to spend it on special needs or on housing or on health or lots of other things as well. And final point I'd make is, you know, the pressures on teachers are enormous. I know I've got a son who's a teacher, my wife was a teacher, and we really ought to thank all those working in schools, teachers, support staff and others for the extraordinary job they do, because education, the chance to go to school, to open a window on the world, gives us self-confidence and aspiration. And if we're going to help people to change their lives, it's that self-confidence and aspiration and knowledge that is going to make the biggest difference to the children of our community.
Okay, thank you. Karen, same question, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, whilst I was listening to everybody except Hilary, I was thinking, where are you going to get the money from? It's really important that we think about this. It's not to belittle any issue, affordable housing, special educational needs, whatever. They are all very important issues, but we need to pay for them from somewhere. And we can't just drive it through by saying there's going to be a wealth tax. Individuals will leave the country. We can't do it by just imposing taxes on industries or companies, because they will leave our country and then we will have people out of work. So we need to be really careful about how we frame this discussion and what we spend our money on. And like in any household, you have to choose what to spend your money on. I would choose education. I agree with Hilary. It's absolutely the way forward. My father was absolutely aspirational about education with me and my brother, and it has enabled me to give my children a very different life from the one that I was brought up in, and certainly a very different life from my grandmother and her children. I am very, very proud of the Conservatives' record on state education. It is a great thing that we are now in a position where we are leading in league tables. We're in the top 4 for reading. We're in the top 7 for maths. That's great. Those are essential skills for our children to have. And then I would say one more thing. When we're talking about special educational needs, let's not forget the role that private schools play in that. And there are lots of children who are in private education because state education doesn't work for them in whatever way that is, whether it's care or whether it's because of bullying or because they need a different pathway. The 20% VAT tax that Labour are saying they would impose is going to mean that a lot of children do not have the ability to go to those special schools now. And by special, I mean a private school which can cope for them. A friend of mine has this week, because of the threat of that tax and the threat of the Labour government, has had to close his prep school. The parents are they're going abroad, they're going to state schools. It is a really misconceived policy. And as a planning lawyer, I can tell you, we're always looking for new school places. this is going to make sharp-elbowed middle classes run to the best state schools, and poorer children are going to lose out because they won't be going to those state schools, and they will be going to the worst schools. So, Hilary, I really want you to talk to your people about how misguided your education, your private school ban will be. And I'm very happy to take it offline as well. I'm really
I will take to Ed.
Yeah, so I firmly believe that the climate crisis is the full impact of it is yet to be felt, but it is very much a shadow over us, and I think it needs massive attention. I think it also presents, if I'm trying to be an optimist, and I'm an optimist, I also think it presents like big opportunities. I think we absolutely need to follow the lead of some of the other countries. I think they've done this to an extent in the US and some of the Scandinavian countries to really go big on what you might call a green industrial revolution. So that'd be serious investment, which would need a large. It would need kind of significant input and leadership from government towards skilling up people for green jobs. Really kind of big action in particular on retrofitting of, so insulation of houses. So the Greens are committed to a £29 billion insulation scheme across houses across the UK, which would clearly, sorry, I'm finding this being annoying. Which would clearly kind of go some way towards helping with the cost of living crisis, but also create a whole load of jobs, and also be really, really good for the economy, because actually bills wouldn't be quite so kind of astronomical. Also, real investment in public transport, which again is good for the economy. I think so often we've been told, I don't know if about trickle-down economics, which is the idea that actually if you just help the wealthier get wealthier, then that's really good for the rest of us. Actually, I think that's failing. You look across the world and it's failing. Actually, we need investment in grassroots, into our communities, around transport, around housing, and so on. Yeah, I think we need to be, finally, I think I'd say we need to be really honest about the climate crisis. I don't think it's something that is a small thing that we can probably just kind of put on one side whilst we focus on anything else. I think it is something that we need to speak really frankly about. I think it's going to have a really significant impact on societies across the world in the coming generation. I think there's so many unknowns about it. None of us really kind of can predict how it will go, but it's going to create a whole load of extra economic, political, social squeeze on us all. And so perhaps finally, I'd say I think there's something really important about recognizing that change is coming, climate change is coming, and in things like youth and community work, and building a stronger, more resilient communities, so that whatever the future throws at us, whatever the climate crisis throws at us, we will be strong communities and able to withstand those challenges.
Thank you, Ed. I'll go to Karen next, please.
I agree with what Ed said about the climate change problems causing a squeeze on communities across the world. We're going to see water crises, we're going to see flooding crises, we're going to see heat crises, where other nations will not be able to cope in their environment. That will cause another pressure on us and on Europe, which is migration. And we will have to be extremely resilient and have communities and we will have to have a real policy to make sure that not only are we caring for people who are in distress from other countries, but we're caring for our own. The other thing I would say, investment, where's it coming from? Who is going to pay for this investment? And you've got to be really careful that you don't scare off the people who are earning the money. The other thing I would say to you is be very careful when you're talking about net zero, as opposed to being able to put a meal on the table every night for your child. You have to be really careful about that. Lots of people will put short-termism ahead of long-termism when they have a stark choice to make for their family. And it doesn't seem that, you know, it's not immediately apparent to them that their life will change, their children's lives will change from climate change when they are feeling the squeeze. It's really important that we're all humble about that.
Thank you, Karen. Hilary, I'll take you next.
Well, this is one of the greatest challenges that the world faces, because the climate science is absolutely crystal clear. And we are seeing hotter summers and wetter winters. And people living in other parts of the world, if they can't remain where they were born and brought up because either it stopped raining. I have met climate refugees who moved from their village because it stopped raining, and they're not going to stay where they're living now to drown if sea levels rise. So we have a moral and a shared international responsibility to do something about this. And it does worry me that some of the parties standing this election say, get rid of this net zero nonsense. It's terrible. I think that is hugely irresponsible for the future of the planet, but we have to have a practical plan. We would establish Great British Energy as part of our Clean Energy by 2030 plan. How do we pay for it? Fair question. By having a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. We would double onshore wind. There's been a ban on onshore wind, which is the cheapest of the lot. We would energy transition technology in green hydrogen and in nuclear, not popular with everyone, but on the occasions when the wind does not blow, either you've got to have all the energy stored to draw it down, or you need something that will generate what's called baseload capacity when we all put on the kettle and the TV at the same time of an evening. We would not issue any more oil and gas licenses. That's really important. And there's an opportunity here for jobs. Gas boilers to heat pumps over time. Well, we should be making the heat pumps. As we move to more off and onshore wind, we should be making works, because our electricity grid was set up, big power stations, they used to be coal, and they send the electricity down the wires and we receive them in our houses and homes. And the problem with that is it's not last night who runs a community energy company, and if the village that's going to have a turbine gets a benefit in the form of income that they could use to pay for things in the village, to make it more beautiful, to run the community centre, you're binding people into this. It has to be done. It's not a burden. It is an opportunity, but it's an opportunity we have to seize. And those who say, if I shut my eyes, all of this will go away, I think are letting down the next generation and the one after that.
Thank you, Hilary. I'm going to go with George.
Hello, yeah, thank you. This is probably one of the biggest issues of our time and of the election, To be quite frank, it's a little bit existential. You know, if we don't do anything about this, if we don't do anything about the climate crisis, then a lot of really, really, really bad things are going to happen around the world to an awful lot of people. And as pointed out, you know, this will cause, you know, a lot rise in refugee numbers. It will displace a huge amount of people and will cause an enormous amount of human suffering, all of which we have a moral duty to prevent. Essentially, if we do this, then we have not only the opportunity to fulfill our moral duty in that sense, but also to deliver lots and lots of green jobs, to deliver lots and lots of economic benefits as other countries around the world also go down the same path to net zero, as now the global consensus is reaching that we must reach net zero. And so if we as Britain can be the country that's coming out and saying, look, we know how to build wind turbines. I work at a company that is making power converters for robots that build and survey and maintain wind turbines. We will benefit hugely because of the fact that we can export that technology across the world. We will sell those to people in Brazil, in China, in Norway, because that British technology is vital for delivering on net zero. And that is the opportunity we have here, not just to fulfill our moral obligations, but also to deliver a huge economic bonus as well. And finally, many of the steps needed to reach this net zero situation also directly benefit people. By investing in insulating people's homes, we will make it cheaper to heat them, which will directly benefit people as well. And that's why the Liberal Democrats want to focus on investing in the green technology sections of our society and our economy, and in investing in the things that we can do to ensure that people can reach net zero in their own home as quickly as possible in a manner that benefits them, such as by making homes warmer and cheaper to heat with 10-year emergency upgrade programs, starting with free insulation and funding more heat pumps across more homes to ensure that people can heat their homes cheaper and greener. We'll also, make 90% of our energy grid renewable by 2030. As pointed out, you do need that base load capacity. It takes you a heck of a long time to build a nuclear power station. The problem with nuclear power is that currently it gets more expensive the longer you leave it running, which isn't a great situation. And it may well be that it is the only route that we can take. And if needed, then yes, we should build more nuclear power. But we must keep our minds open. We must keep investing in renewable technology, because I am confident that at some point we will create technology that will be able to reach net zero by 2045, and we will reach it in a stronger economic position with people paying less for their day-to-day needs. And that is really beneficial on every single level imaginable, in my opinion.
Thank you, George. Same question to Darryl, please.
Yeah, it seems like the whole world is in unison about the biggest problem we've got in the world facing us is the climate crisis. So coming from New Zealand, we enjoyed the glaciers, and you could see year by year they were disappearing because of the warming that was going on. So I looked it up on the internet and was telling people there's probably no more glaciers, the Franz Josef and the Fox over in New Zealand. And you look it up on the internet, and amazingly, since the year 2000, they've actually been growing back and getting bigger and bigger. So that really is the opposite of what people are saying. So I think, to sum it all up, the climate crisis is a load of rubbish. It is a business that people are making money on. The biggest investment companies in the world are setting up funds that you can pour your money into. And depending on the ESG, the numbers, the counts that they give things, people pour money into it. I believe that technologies can change, but I've watched, because I have a car park in front of where I live, and there's 2 places where electric cars can charge. There's not enough spaces, yet hardly anybody has an electric car. Yet we've already got a problem with the infrastructure. It's not going to work. There's not enough minerals in the world and special metals to make all these cars. So these Agenda 2030, Agenda 2045, I'm sorry, it's a load of rubbish. Most of it is just made up. The facts are we're trying to be like little gods, trying to manage this world. God made this world, and he just wants us to look after it and take care of it, not to try and work it all out and start putting these ridiculous limits on us. Cars that are all working on batteries, it's no good. I don't
Thank you,
believe all of
Daryl.
it.
Daniel.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm probably going to cover a lot of points that have already been discussed. That's just the nature of us not going in a specific order. This is going to happen. The question itself was, how do we increase getting to net zero? I don't think we should speed it up. I think rushing it is a bad idea. We need to approach it in a planned and methodical manner, and these things need to be done correctly. If we try and rush into this too quickly, we're not going to end up with a usable infrastructure. At the SDP, we believe the long-term solution should be small nuclear power plants built by British companies such as Rolls-Royce to feed the base load for the country. We would offset that. Obviously, it can't be done instantly. It is a long-term thing, but we do need that long-term solution. We would bring in lots of things to mandate energy efficiency into new builds and new buildings, such as solar panels, more green products within the creation of buildings. There's a lot out there that can be done that isn't yet legislation that can make all these things greener. We would also we would increase national tree coverage, always abiding by the principle of the right tree in the right place for the right reason. We would increase this where is possible and where is where it is possible and where it is sensible to do so. We wouldn't just be throwing trees everywhere. We would also bring in agroforestry practices to incorporate managed grazing and well-supported a national hedgerow protection scheme. Goodness me, I do apologise for falling over my own words. We also our workforce in this country and start producing things in this country, because at the moment when we're importing things, really we're just offshoring many of our emissions because we're not in control of how these things are developed and how these things are produced and what kind of environmental effects they are having elsewhere in the world. So we need to be, people talked about moral responsibility. We need to be morally responsible, and if we're building things in this country, we can control the environment and the local communities, and also reindustrializing obviously will bring better prosperity for our own people. We would also put an expenditure on heat pumps and installations and household solar panels and double triple glazing for the home. Obviously the more secure a home is, more heat, as many have mentioned before. We would also research into battery technology, hydrogen, nuclear energy, tidal and low energy transport. We would research into all these things to give us more options and more solutions moving forward, because we need more alternatives as well. We're doing lots of things well and we're moving lots of things in the right direction, but we don't have 100% solution. So we need to continue to research into other areas to give us better options as we move forward.
Right, so it's going to be in 3 parts, all right? I'm going to change the view again. Right, so I'm going to go with George first, I think. So George, you're going to have to get ready to unmute. So the question is, how do you feel about the proposed disability benefit reform? And do you agree that depression and anxiety is unfair on everybody else? And then part 2, if you're going to support disabled people back to work, how are you going to do that and make sure there are no deaths caused by taking a benefit? And 3, would you agree with giving vouchers instead of PIP to disabled people?
Okay, so I think it's really, really important that we enable disabled people to take up work and that we enable them to make choices about their life, about their work, how they wish to do so. I'm going to answer the third part of the question first, because I think PIP is a good example of this. PIP is one of the many ways that we can give disabled people more independence about their lives. At the whole point of it, personal independence payment. And it's for that reason that I wouldn't be in favour of using a voucher-based system instead, because I think it does give disabled people independence. If I thought that, PIP wasn't being used effectively, and if that's the case, then we should provide more support to people who are receiving PIP to help them to understand and to sort of, spend that money better and to sort of, better budget and plan out what they want to spend it on. I think we also do need to it's worth pointing out that PIP is often abused. I know of someone who is a close friend of mine, and their parents essentially manage or take all of their PIP for them. And they don't have access to their own bank account, and so it's not really an independence payment at all. And this is the kind of thing that we need to crack down on, and we need to say, no, you can't do this. Like personal independence payment is there to enable disabled people to be more independent. We also need to ensure that disabled people can get back to work. We need to do so by enabling employers to make accommodations for disabled people as well. I also think one area where we need to make progress here is in 0 hours contracts. A lot of disabled people end up on 0 hours contracts because it means that they can choose the hours that they work. And if they're not able to work a certain day because their disability is particularly flaring up, as often they do, then they can say, no, we're not going to work this day. And that can give them good flexibility. But all too often, 0 hours contracts are used to exploit people and to give them really, really unfair working conditions. I myself was on the positive end of this. I was on a 0 hours contract myself until about a couple of years ago, and I found it really beneficial. However, too many people are exploited through the 0 hours contract system, and that's why the Liberal Democrats would introduce a 20% higher minimum wage for people on a 0 hours contract, and we would also introduce a new dependent contractor status for people to ensure that we recognise that actually, you can't just have huge numbers of staff as 0 hours contracts and then say, well, we'll hire and fire them or just not give them any work. You have to have more protection around those workers' rights. Finally, I do think that we should, include
I'm not sure what happened.
Progress.
Hello, sorry.
No, it's okay, Jack. Go on.
Well, yeah, my phone ran out of charge. But essentially, yes, we should continue to support disabled people to get back into the workplace. It's a really great opportunity, and I think that is something that we should absolutely put our energy behind.
Thank you. I'll send that question to Daryl, please.
Yeah, I think disabled people back to work is a good thing, as long as you're working with them. And with the technology changes we've had over the years, I mean, this is new to me, all of this Zoom. So it opens up the opportunity for these people that are at home, they're housebound or they're in pain. And unfortunately, like the 0 hours he was just mentioning, there is that feeling that big businesses can manipulate the situation and use and abuse it. But because of the technological changes working with the disabled people, they will have opportunities they've never had before. Now, I'm not sure integrating it into the workforce, because I don't think it's right that we force big companies into making sure that 20% of their workforce is disabled. I'm not, like they're doing with the equality stuff. But yes, as far as the disabled, I am for technology helping them get back into work. Very positive about that. On silent. I can't hear you.
No, you couldn't. Do you think they should be given vouchers instead of PIP benefit?
I can't hear you. Say that louder, please.
Do you think that they should be given vouchers instead
I think
of
I heard the word voucher. Yeah, I think I heard that question before.
benefit?
No, I think vouchers are too limiting, and that could be putting a load onto the disabled person. No, I don't think vouchers would work, but I'm sure there's more that can be done for them. I know a few disabled people, and I've had a relation, and I know that there's been so much done. I mean, my uncle had a car that was totally changed, his favorite Jaguar, and when he got all that changed for his disability, it was such a proud moment for him. So it changed his life, being able to drive his car that he was so passionate about. So yeah, I understand, and I do agree that disabled people need to be part of our society, and we should do anything we can to integrate them back in, and not put restrictions there. So no, I don't think the vouchers are going to be a positive thing for them. It's limiting.
Thank you, Darryl. I'll ask that now to Daniel.
Could you just repeat the question for me, please, Christine? I missed that middle part.
I can't. My voice is a little hoarse. So, where is it? Oh, so the first part was about the proposed disability reform. Do you agree with the depression and anxiety, as said by Rishi, that it was unfair on everybody else? Then there was, if you were to support disabled people back to work, how would you do that and make sure there were no deaths caused by those changes, as there has been previously? And the last one was, do you agree with vouchers?
Right, thank you very much. Firstly, no, I don't agree with the reform, the way it's being done. I think some reform needs to be done. I think it just needs a review and it needs readdressing. Secondly, anyone who is suffering from anxiety and other mental health issues, that, you know, it has an impact on their family and their friends and all them around them. But it's not a choice to be unwell. You know, if you were to get a physical injury, you were to get a physical illness, you don't choose to go out and get a physical illness. It's something that happens to you, and it's a unrequested and a very sad and sorry situation. We should be helping and supporting these people as best we can. We do need to improve our mental health services. That will help a lot of people get back into work, because not everybody who is out of work on disability is out of work because of physical reasons. I think we can look, as was mentioned by some of the other candidates, with the more modern technologies and the more advanced we've become, there are different ways people are able to contribute into the workplace. There are different ways people are able to contribute into society, and these technologies can be taken advantage of to give the opportunity to people. With regards to PIP, I do agree that it should be kept as PIP. It should be kept as a monetary payment. It is very important that people are able to access the independence in this way, and independence is a really, really big thing for someone who's suffering with any kind of disability. I don't like the idea of a voucher scheme, but I can see that in very special circumstances, vouchers could be used to help prevent vulnerable people being taken advantage of. And although I don't want to use a voucher scheme, I think in certain cases, in particular aspects, a voucher scheme could be utilised to prevent the vulnerable being taken advantage of. And just, you know, we need to bring in a resilience strategy into schools for good mental health and good understanding of our own well-being, and teach young people how to look after themselves better. So when they're moving into adulthood, they are better equipped and they have the tools to deal with what life throws at them. And start it early. You know, the earlier people know about these things and how to look after themselves. We teach them how to brush their teeth, teach them about personal hygiene and looking after themselves, why are we not teaching them how to look after their mental health and well-being as well? And you know, 5% of under 35s receive a disability benefit, and they have no qualifications. We would look to set up support for these people, specifically targeting people of this nature to help them get and contribute to society and contribute to their communities. And for people in that scenario, of course, being paid to work is a marvellous thing, but just starting them with volunteer things and giving them the self-esteem that they're achieving with what they are doing is a great way to start them on the road to independence.
Thank you, Daniel. Karen, I'll send that question to you next.
I didn't know 15 years ago very much about anxiety and depression. And then somebody very close to me had a nervous breakdown, and I learned about it big time. Anxiety and depression are real illnesses. However, work is one of the structured and validating things that gives back self-esteem and confidence. And it's really, really important that we bring people into work. It's worrying that we're losing lots of our 50-somethings to a life of sitting on the sofa and watching daytime TV. I would say that I don't actually personally know enough about the PIP system and the voucher system, but I have listened very carefully to what other people have said about the vulnerabilities of some disabled people, and I can imagine that from experiences. So I would say that we do need to treat anxiety and depression seriously as an illness, and we do need to treat mental illness exactly as has been said, Daniel, as if we were treating a physical illness. And for too long we have not done that. However, it can't just be a "oh, poor little me." It's got to be real, and there has to be a way back into work and contribution to society.
Okay, thank you. Hilary, question to you.
Thanks very much. Vouchers, no, there is a huge problem with PIP. The last time I looked at the figures, about 70% of people in Leeds who appeal against the PIP assessment to the tribunal, which is independent, are successful. There's something fundamentally wrong with the system. If you imagine that 70% of people convicted of a criminal offence who appealed to the High Court were released because the conviction was overturned, there'd be an outcry. How is it that so many cases are being wrongly assessed in the first instance? So that's the second point I would make. We would introduce a full right to equal pay for disabled people, backed up by disability pay reporting. We'd improve employment support, partly by devolving funding to local areas, because in the end, the question in the past has been too much. You're either capable of working or you're not capable of working, and there's nowhere in between. The question to ask is, given the disability that you have, and it takes many different forms, and mental health is particularly difficult because you may feel up to going to work today, and tomorrow you may not be able to get out of bed at all. In other words, to look at what is needed to help that individual do what they are capable of to help them back into the labour market. We need to tackle the access to work backlog. We need to help people to try out jobs without fear that there's going to be a benefit reassessment that means that they will lose money, and the work capability assessment, as I said a moment ago, isn't working, and it needs either reform or replacement.
Okay, thank you, Ed. It's just worth noting you can work and get PIP. So PIP isn't exclusive to if you can or can't work, it's for the cost of the disability. Sorry, Ed. Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, so the PIP system and the welfare system we've got is fundamentally is broken. I think it's punishing as an aside is I think it's absolutely fundamental that we need representatives from whichever party who are really woven into the fabric of our communities. And I think yeah, sorry to single you out, Karen, but I think it's worrying when a party can't find a local representative who at least has some sense of kind of what's going on the ground and has to drop someone in from very far away who has no links around this kind of thing. So that's sorry. Yeah, but that one's important for me, I think.
That's a bit rude.
So is it rude? Sorry.
Well, I think it's a bit rude. Throughout our glorious history in our wonderful democracy, people have represented places that they have not come from, and I stand for the values of my party, which you obviously don't agree with. But I do think it's wrong to criticise me like that. That was a really cheap guide.
But I think to not know the lived experience of people in our communities around something like PIP is concerning. But anyway, so we the Greens are committed to a 5% uplift in disability benefits, kind of from day one. There was a mention, I can't remember who it was, who talks about the concern, and it is, yeah, there's that concern that, well, isn't the benefit system just incredibly open to abuse and everyone's just on the take, etc. It's worth saying that that benefit abuse, as in people kind of taking money they shouldn't be entitled to, is dwarfed like over 100 times over by people who are illegally evading and avoiding tax. So there's money to be made there, and I think there's a real question about where we're putting our attention. Are we going to try to punish these people over here who are really kind of taking small scraps, or actually are we going to focus on the big fish who are really kind of taking a huge amount of money out of the system? For us, again, no to vouchers. We think that is just kind of feeding the humiliation. It's not right. It's in our policy to not go down that. But I think then finally there's just a much wider issue. And again, this is long-term stuff. It's not about saying that none of us would be able to fix this quickly, but there's something about just building a system, like for example, a work system. So I think we'd all agree that work can be brilliant. Getting people into work can be so validating, can lend so much purpose. But actually, I think there's a big responsibility on us to how can we make an economy and a work field, industries that are really inviting and humanizing, and not this kind of like, we have so in many ways, so many people are kind of like stuck into kind of jobs or invited into industries where actually there's not much life there. And actually to work hard at building an economy that's more humanizing, a housing system that is more supportive, transport systems that are more supportive of people, health systems that enable people to live more flourishing lives. And going back to a comment from earlier, I think we've been brainwashed into believing all this stuff is pie in the sky, it's impossible. There are countries in the world who are having a pretty good stab at making this stuff happen, about creating good, strong communities, good, strong systems. In this country, over the last 2 generations, we've been told it's not possible. We have to settle for these kind of dehumanizing, underfunded systems, and that's the best it's ever going to get. And I think that's nonsense.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, your next question, candidates. I'll go to Karen first, because it's one of your party's policies, I believe. How do you feel about the national service, and if your party wins, would you be keeping it on? Just unmute, Karen.
At my father's funeral, I gave his eulogy. One of the things I said was that if you had heard my father talk about the Navy as which he'd been in for 2 years, between 18 and 20, as a boy from the World's End in Chelsea, you'd have thought he was Admiral of the Fleet. And it gave him structure and further education, and he saw the world from his aircraft carrier. Do I think that that kind of national service is what our youth today should be doing? No, but I do believe that the notion of public service, and let's face it, that's what we're all doing, Hillary's been doing for years. Public service is extremely important, and we need to reinstill in our young people that structure and that desire to serve the country. I think there are many forms that national service can take, but I do think that for many young lads in particular who are lacking a structured background, going into something very disciplined for a couple of years, a year, would be very advantageous. And I say that as somebody who comes from a family with experience of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't hear you.
Same question.
Who are you
Ed.
asking?
Was it me?
There you go. Yeah, it's you.
Yeah, I didn't hear who it was designed for. So national service. I think it's worth saying that I do think that when that came out as an announcement from the Conservative leadership, I do think in many ways I think that we should be rightly cynical, because I think it was partly just to grab a load of headlines and say, look at us, we're tough and blah blah blah, and I think because the Conservatives know that they're not going to be in government anytime soon, and they're not going to have to implement it, but they got some headlines. Having said that, I do somewhat agree with what Karen was just saying. I think actually, yeah, kind of creating opportunities for people to have potentially quite life-changing experiences, like along the tracks of what national service can provide, is a good thing. So and I think there's something really interesting around the idea of we live in a very plural, very very plural society, very diverse society. I think there's something interesting to look at around building collective identity, not singular identity, and the idea of people going through a singular experience is really good like that. I don't think that I don't think it should be, and I think this is what Karen was saying. Forgive me if it isn't. I think we wouldn't necessarily want to go down a militaristic service, and it all be about kind of learning how to kind of kill people. But I think there are many ways in which people could they could learn skills and kind of be involved in public service in many other ways. Finally, I'd add, I think again we have to put this particular idea against the wider backdrop. There's a real issue around people going into the military service and then coming out of military service and then actually really struggling because society is very dysfunctional on lots of levels. So I think at the same time, if we were to instigate this, I think we need to work hard at building good social infrastructure like housing, health, etc., so that when people come out, they're coming into a kind of a healthy society that's able to support people and doesn't just then leave people kind of desperately broken outside of this system that has organised their life for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, thank you. Daniel?
Hello there, everybody. No, we don't support a national service as such. We think our military would be much better served by people being there who actually wanted to be there, were actually prepared to do what needs to be done in the services. We would, however, make reservation for reservists who would be guaranteed a minimum of 10 days special annual leave from their employer, in addition to their statutory entitlement to undertake military training. Obviously, this could impact small businesses, and they would be able to claim back some of the financial thing from the Ministry of Defence. We do, however, support that we need more things for people of a young age, and we would support things such as the Duke of Edinburgh scheme and alternatives along the lines of the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, where you could volunteer in your communities, where you could volunteer at local to support local medical services, you know, care homes and such, and do a lot of the social things that are missed out on, where you know, just people being able to interact with other people and support other people in their community. And we can put these things into a structured manner, basically putting people together so they can succeed together. And there's lots of different ways that can be done, and there's lots of different things. And if anybody's interested, keep an eye out, because we are developing a policy on this.
Thank you, Daniel. Daryl?
Yes, personally, I believe the national service would be a good idea for all the young'uns, boys and girls, possibly just for a year, and then they can get back to their career choices. But in that time, it's going to give them discipline. It's going to get them to work as a team, because our younger people are so individual, locked up in bedrooms with the technology that they've had, and they've gone through COVID. They're used to not interacting. They're used to being on their own. So I think that would be positive. But people that are coming out of the service, I do believe there's more need to look after them, and there's some issues. There's a lot of mental issues. They need support, and I don't believe there are people that have come out of different services. But yes, national service for a minimum of a year, like the Jewish, the Israelis, they conscript them all, and everyone has to go. And I think it's a great opportunity to learn a skill as well. So yes, I'm for it.
Thank you, Daryl. George?
Hello, yeah, so I am opposed to national service, both in the military sense and in the forced or voluntary sense. Well, not voluntary sense, but the forced voluntary community work sense. In terms of the military, I think the solution to having, you know, a small and too underfunded military is to try and recruit more people into the military who want to be there, because A, they'll be the best soldiers, and B, at the end of their 3-year stint, they're most likely to then want to carry on and stay after. And that will mean that they'll then become, you know, even better soldiers, and, you know, they'll learn more. And then that'll be really good and allow us to have a really, really highly trained army, and not one that's filled up with young people who don't really want to be there. Well, if they do want to be there, it's because it's the best of a bad bunch of options for them. But I want to talk about, you know, why did Rishi Sunak propose this policy? Why did he come out and say it? Well, there was a lot of, you know, hype just before the election around, you know, the UK defence, and could the UK defend itself if we were to be attacked? And a poll was released saying that, you know, only, I believe it was about 30% of young people said that they would be willing to be conscripted if needed for the country's defence. And this was like a really shocking number. And many people are like, well, you know, young people are all just completely unpatriotic. And I just don't think that's the case. I think the reason that young people don't see the military in a positive light isn't because they're not patriotic and because they hate their country. I think it's because they've seen for too long the military to be used in manners that they don't really approve of. So things like the Iraq War happened during my childhood, and after having seen that, it doesn't really bode well when I'm there sitting there at 16 and going, should I consider a career in the military, when actually all I've seen growing up, or a large portion of what I've seen growing up, is the military being used in a way that I thought was unethical, and my parents thought was unethical as well. So I would say that if Britain was to come under serious threat of attack, I am confident that young people in this country would volunteer for the military still, because they would be standing up to defend something that they actually believed in, which is their right to participate in a free and fair society. In terms of broader things, we definitely should invest more in the ability for young people to get involved in their community projects, and in voluntary projects as well. Because if you give young people the opportunity to do so, they will take up these opportunities because they do want to make their area better. The vast majority of them do. And, they want to get the skills and they want to get the experience. You don't have to force them to do so. Like if there was, tons and tons of skills and training opportunities available for young people and loads of jobs for them to take up, then they would. Like they're not just sitting around because they don't want to do anything. They're sitting around because there isn't anything to do. And that's why we need to invest more in our communities and invest more in youth services to enable young people to have volunteering opportunities that they can take up of their own free volition because they want to do so.
Thank you, George. Hilary?
I have the greatest admiration for those who serve the nation, both in the armed forces. I have met our military performing humanitarian operations, contributing to peacekeeping around the world. I also have the greatest admiration for people who serve the nation and the community in a very wide range of jobs, whether it's teaching our children or looking after the sick at the LGI and Jimmy's, or serving people in shops. These are all different forms of public service, a point that's been made earlier. I don't support what Rishi Sunak announced. Frankly, I think it was a gimmick. And the proof of that is he wasn't able to answer some really quite basic questions, because you can come up with gimmicks, but government taking responsibility is about developing a policy, thinking it through, being able to explain it. How's it going to work? How are you going to plan it? And he wasn't able to ask the most basic questions. How are you going to enforce this either service in the community, I think it was 1 weekend in 4, or having to be in the military on people who don't want to do it? What sanction are you going to apply? And none of that could be answered because it hadn't been thought through. It was, as has been said, about a headline. However, we do have to recognise that 1 in 8 young people are not in education, training or employment, which is why one of the ideas we're putting forward at the election is for a youth guarantee that would provide training, apprenticeship or help in finding a job for all 18 to 24-year-olds. And I agree with what was just said about there being lots of opportunities to volunteer locally in the community. I think of once going to one of the organisations that works with older people, and there were young people, students and others helping to run what they call their Silver Surfer Club, to pass on IT skills to those who didn't necessarily have them. And you saw this fantastic interaction between the older people and the young people, and they both got a great deal out of it. And we should encourage everyone who is volunteering for the betterment of our society.
Thank you, Hilary. Okay, we're going to take some questions from the chat. So the next question will be a 2-parter. You might have already read it, but I'll read it again. So this lady works for the Youth Justice Service, and it is evident there is a huge systematic failing of young people. Young people are criminalised for low-level crimes such as possession and personal use of cannabis. If it was entirely up to you, what changes would you like to see within our youth justice system? National policies she would like, not just Leeds. And the second part is, how would you stop the youth engaging in gangs? And I will level that to Daniel first, please.
Yes, I think I heard some of that. Youth justice. Yeah, I think the youth, that's part of growing up, is you make mistakes, you get in trouble, you do your time, you get a penalty. And I don't think it should be held against them for too long. Otherwise, you're destroying, you're putting something against them for jobs and their career, for having some cannabis or whatever their crime is, the lower ones, like you're saying. You take a young person who has made a mistake, they've done the wrong thing, and you put them in with a group of possibly hardened gang members, then you're exposing them. So I don't believe incarceration and treating them all the same. I think if ever possible, try and put them into different schemes in different rehabilitated ways. I definitely do not like the idea of putting them in gangs and in jail, incarcerate them and create bigger criminals, long-term criminals, long career criminals. Not again. I definitely want something else to happen there. It's a pattern that can ruin people's lives. So yeah, possibly my personal view would be for some of these smaller crimes, if they are just smaller crimes, why have them on their records for so long? Let them be able to clean their records up after they've done their duties, their hours of service for the community, or whatever their penalty is. Let that disappear quickly off their records. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Daryl. Daniel, next, please.
Hello there, everybody. Yeah, we don't want to tarnish young people. We've never wanted to tarnish young people. Personally, cannabis will remain illegal, and for me, we should be having on-the-spot fines if you're caught with it, because it does have detrimental effect for long-term use on mental health and other such things, and there are consequences for the users that have these. For those that have been detained for whatever reason, we would like to see them go under a review system when they're coming to the end of that, to see how they can be supported better. What reasons were there for them ending up in that situation in the first place? Do they have learning disabilities? Do they have anxiety issues? Do they have other issues? So they can be supported better when going out back into the community. And these things, I mean, if you get 3 points, I mean, this is a personal opinion. This isn't a party opinion, by the way. If you get 3 points on your driving license, they're only there for a certain length of time. And I don't see why low level and small things should be on a young person's record for the rest of their life. They should drop off after a certain length of time. Once you have served your time and once you have it has come to a conclusion, they shouldn't be tarred with this forever.
Thank you, Daniel. Hilary, same question to you.
Well, this is a really, really important question, which I've thought a fair bit about, because for a year I was the Minister of Prisons and Probation. The first thing, of course, we should aim to do is to divert people away from crime. Why do people get involved in crime? So many of the people you encounter in prison have got little or no educational qualifications at all, which is why I made the point earlier about the importance of going to school. Because if you come out of school, you've got no qualification, you find it much harder to get a job, then you're more likely to be drawn into what appears to be at first sight, a glamorous way of earning a living, which links to the point about gangs, because people see that as a quick route to easy money. And the gangs are very, very clever and very, very sophisticated in grooming young people. They groom them. And the young person thinks, oh, I found a new friend. But before long, they find that they are bound up in this criminal enterprise, county lines, and all of that stuff. Even when people are in prison, being able to do something purposeful and useful, because if you didn't have any skills when you went in and you have no skills when you come out, you're going to be in the same position. And I know, because I saw some of the schemes that some of the prisons I was responsible for a short period were operating, a great scheme that the Gasnex Works were doing, where they took young offenders, put them with 2 experienced staff, trained them in laying gas pipes, and said, if you get the qualification, we'll find you a job when you come out. And they were able to divert those young people because they saw a future and they were able to follow the mentors that were working with them. Employers who are willing to take a risk on someone who has a criminal record. And we work to encourage employers to do that. And the best employer to persuade another employer to take that step is the employer who's tried it out and said, yes, I was a bit skeptical, but you know what? We found some good people, and it may not always work out. And they need to know what will happen if it doesn't work out, and that the person needs to be laid off. But if it does work, it gives them a chance. I would also say, going back to the gang point, it's taken far too long to ban the sale of a wide variety of bladed weapons. It's a point I've raised in the House of Commons. I mean, why do you need to buy a machete in Leeds? Could someone please answer that question for me? And the government has promised, they said before the election, they would tighten it up. There's a shop called Fantasia by Leeds Market that some of you may be familiar with. My wife said to me she saw people lining up. Someone who's over 18 goes to the shop, buys the knife, and then passes it on to someone who's under 18. Good on the council, good on the police, because they got a partial closure order to prevent Fantasia from selling certain weapons. But these shouldn't be available. If you are going to go to Belize to cut the jungle down, well, you could apply the same system that you have to have for shotguns, or you're a farmer that needs to clear land. You could have a licensing system, but you do not need and should not be able to buy in a shop or by post bladed weapons, which I'm afraid we see young people today carrying on the streets of Leeds and inflict great harm, above all, on themselves and other young people.
Thank you, Hilary. I'll go with George next.
Yes, so the Liberal Democrats are in favour of the decriminalisation of marijuana. We think that this would enable us to free up more police officers' times. And fundamentally, you're allowed to do lots of things in this country that are dangerous to your own mental health and they're dangerous, to your own health in general. You can smoke, you can drink, you can eat lots of cake if you want. I mean, not all of those things are as bad necessarily as smoking marijuana, but fundamentally, you are allowed to do dangerous things in this country if you decide to do so of your own free will. And simply banning, drugs hasn't, made them any less attractive for young people. In fact, many people would argue that they have made them more attractive for young people, and that more people do them as a result of this. So the Liberal Democrats, we would decriminalise marijuana. And I personally think that we should also investigate, drug reform more widely in terms of decriminalising other drugs as well and creating a full legalised market for cannabis in the UK as well. At the end of the day, we could also apply VAT on that, which means that instead of there being a tax because the gangs are taking away their huge cuts of money, we would instead get that to be able to invest it in mental health services, which would be better, and we could instigate potency limits. So that's why the Liberal Democrats are in favour of full legalised market cannabis, and we're going to look at decriminalising other drugs as well if we can. In terms of young offending, more generally, how do we keep young people out of prison? And how do we, if they have gone into prison, how do we ensure that they can be rehabilitated as effectively as possible? Well, we need to ensure young people leave school with the skills they need to get a job or to go on to university or higher education or further education, if that's what they choose to do so. But we need to ensure that they have those skills available. We will also improve the provision of training, education and work opportunities in prisons. So again, people can leave prison with the skills they then need to find a job so they don't reoffend. We will replace young offenders' institutions with secure schools and secure children's homes to refocus them onto that retraining, onto that training and upskilling young people so they don't just go back into a life of crime. We will ensure that every prison unit will have a national resettlement plan as well to ensure that people who leave prison are able to be rehabilitated into a community and ensure that they can then get a job and then to prevent them from reoffending in the future. Again, all of this will cost us money, but in the long run, it will be cheaper because we'll have less people being repeat offenders, and that will bring down the cost of the prison service overall, as well as
Thank you, George. Sorry. Ed, next, please.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yes, those of us who live in South Leeds kind of really, really are seeing the impact of the wider impact around the failings in the kind of justice system and the policing system. I feel, just yesterday there's been somebody about kind of very overt drug dealing and knife crime happening right on their doorstep in Beeston Hill, and it's just pretty heartbreaking, and people are afraid, and people are looking to move up and get out the neighborhoods, and yeah, so this is kind of a huge crisis that needs dealing with. I think the justice system and generally is kind of creaking and failing, and we need to rethink it. Prison definitely has a part to play, but again, also just needs kind of radically rethinking. I think it's really good, once again, to look at other countries that are trying things differently. I think it's Portugal and some of the Scandinavian countries have really tried to put restorative practice, which is one phrase, really at the heart of their justice work, including with young people. So rather than kind of essentially ostracizing people who break the law, actually trying to reintegrate them as much as possible, trying to get them back into work, that kind of stuff, wanting to really make sure that there is a good level of social infrastructure like youth work and community work and so on, and also kind of mentoring to make sure that people kind of can reintegrate and get back into work and yeah, not find themselves on the edge of society and actually kind of with a whole load of people who want to take them down a bad path, but yeah, back into a good, healthy society. Regarding decriminalising cannabis, I'm going to echo what Steph and Albert were saying in the chat. I think so we as the Green Party would certainly decriminalise cannabis. This would be an opportunity to raise tax, amongst other things. It's really worked pretty well in the US states. I think it's 15 or 20 of the US states have decriminalised cannabis. It's been a success. It's shown to be not really a gateway drug to kind of other drugs. And also, so yes, I know people who've been really badly impacted by overuse of synthetic cannabis, but actually if we were able to regulate that market far better, actually we'd have a much better opportunity at trying to head off some of the really negative impacts that synthetic cannabis, deregulated cannabis can have on mental health. And finally, once again, it's just really important to kind of recognise the need for kind of wide-ranging systemic change, really wanting to reform our work economy. Lots of people, I think, end up in criminal behaviour or whatever, because actually the mainstream work economy is not that attractive. Lots of kind of gig economy jobs, if you can get one at all. And so again, the idea of wanting to really reform our work system, reform our kind of health system, so there's better mental health provision, reforming community provision, so there's good youth and community work. All these things, we need to recognise that it is possible to build a healthy society, and we need to go there. Finally, I should say, I'm actually there's a youth club happening and I need to go in a minute because I need to take the kids home. So I think that's appropriate. So I'm all right for another 5 minutes, but I need to go in the next 5 minutes, I'm afraid.
Okay, no worries. Karen?
I'm not in favour of drugs at all, but I am in favour of decriminalising all drugs. The biggest threat to our society is obesity, and we need to deal with that. We need to deal with the fact that many women turn to prostitution because they are drug addicts. We need to deal with the social structure of what comes with an illegal drug economy, which is mad out there at the moment. It's mad. I've never been offered or taken a drug in my life. But when I went to Portugal, to Lisbon, where it's decriminalised, not legalised, it's a different thing. There were guys coming up to me and going, "Do you want a bit, Charlie? Do you want a bit of heroin?" But there was no sort of rebuff if you said no. It was a deal, and I got the impression that people would go and get a wrap of cocaine and then go home to their house and whatever. It wasn't a city in which people were sitting around in opium dens. I do think that this question links back to our last question about national service and structure and education. And I have been very privileged as a member of the Chartered Surveyors Livery Company to be involved with Brixton Prison's training programme for their restaurant. So you can go into Brixton and you can go to Clink's and you can have breakfast. And I think that's what really needs to happen. We really need to train people rather than just bang them up. And can I commend, Hilary was talking about companies that do this great service of employing ex-cons. Timpson's, can I give them a shout out? They're really brilliant, aren't they, Hilary? They employ these guys to cut keys and re-heel shoes. And the other day I went past and they said, and they got a new board outside that said, if you're unemployed, we will dry clean a suit for you for nothing. They are just a fantastic company. And I love it about them. And that's my idea of social value and what you do. The only other thing I'd say about this is you have to have like to like. So if you are in a gang somewhere in Southwark or Lambeth, only a brother who used to be there and has given it up can talk to you really and influence you. It's no good being your mum or your sister or some white girl who's like me who says it's not a very good idea. You really have to have the people who are talking because they know it and have gone through it and have given it up. And you know, they are the people that we need to respect.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So as we hit the 2-hour mark, that will be at the end of the questions, I'm afraid. Unless you want one change and have Sky TV. Just kidding. Okay, so what we're going to do now is give you 2 minutes each to tell people why they should vote for you. And Ed, as you have to go, I'm going to put you on first. So 2 minutes, why should
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you again to all those tonight and who are going to watch hopefully over the next week or two. To reiterate what others have said, please do just get out and vote. And also, it's not just about voting. I think we need to work hard in South Leeds and everywhere to build a good democratic society, and that's not just about voting. It's also about the role of media. We've talked about South Leeds Life and how brilliant South Leeds Life are, and just the role of discussion and this kind of thing. So yes. Once again, my name's Ed. I live in South Leeds. I love South Leeds. Come what may, next week I'm here for the long term in South Leeds. I'm committed to working with others to make good things happen in this part of Leeds, in this community. I think that, just to reiterate what I said before, I think we have not been well served as a country, being dominated so heavily by two big parties. I think it's been a bit of a straitjacket for us as a society. I think voting reform would help us to get to a more plural political landscape. But in the short term, I'd simply say you don't have to vote for those two big parties. And I think and this community in particular has been dominated by one party for 100 years. So we're the Green Party. We're committed to social justice, to building healthier communities and towards real good, proper action on the climate crisis. And if anyone is able to vote for us, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. I'll give it to George next, please.
Well, thank you everyone for coming and everyone for listening to what we've all had to say here tonight. It's been really interesting hearing everyone's points of views and also hearing what questions were put forward in terms of what people think are the most important issues that we should be tackling I think you should obviously, I think you should vote for me because I live in Leeds South, in South Leeds. I really love the city that I live in here. I think we have some great people. I think that it's a great community, and I think that we can really benefit from having a fairer deal, the one that the Liberal Democrats are providing, where we can have, people who are properly compensated for a hard day's work, and where everyone plays by the same rules. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you vote for the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, George. I'll go to Hilary next, please.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Christine. Look, I just respond to the point that Ed made. He talked about a straitjacket of one party. I'm very proud to be a member of a party that created the National Health Service, that abolished capital punishment, that brought in equal pay, equality legislation, national minimum wage. And I hope if we win the election, we'll bring the railways back into public ownership and give people, workers, rights from day one, like to sick pay, to parental leave, and to protection from unfair dismissal. I think the point I want to make is that life and politics is about choices. And Karen made the point earlier when she talked about our policy on private schools. I would just respond by saying this. When Liz Truss brought in that terrible mini budget, she made a choice which resulted in a lot of damage to the economy, to give the richest 1% of the country a tax cut. Now, I think that was the wrong choice, and we've paid the price for it. I think that the decision to put VAT on private school fees to ensure that there are free breakfast clubs and we can employ more teachers, it is a choice, and it's not a choice which is popular with anyone. But that great Labour minister, Nye Bevan, once said that socialism is the language of priorities, and governing is about making choices. Whatever the outcome of the election, we need to continue to work together as a society. And having said before we started this evening that learning to be able to disagree agreeably is really important in a world when there are plenty of people who are not interested in that, who want to divide, who want to stoke things up, who want to spread fake news and all of those things. In the end, we make progress as a world and society if we work together and make common cause where we can. And that is something I commit to do, whatever happens and whatever the outcome of the election. And thank you so much once again, Southlead Life, for giving us the opportunity together to come together to discuss the things that we've talked about this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, sorry.
Hello, folks. If I were to be elected, I think one of the first things we'd do is look at the public realm in the area. There's lots of things that could be improved, lots of things that should be improved already. My party want to bring the utilities and the railways under public ownership. We want to reindustrialise the country to give people better jobs, better prosperity. We want to build 100,000 council houses nationally every year. I know there's a waiting list. It's over 25,000 people waiting for a council house. It's, that's not really helpful to people. It's not helpful for them to make a family. My party believes in the family, and we support the family. If you look at within South Leeds, we've got the second highest number of elected councillors. We've done a lot of good work in the community, and we're simply looking to continue doing that on a larger scale and helping the community however we can. And it'd be a great honour and a great privilege to represent the people of South Leeds should I be elected.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll take Daryl next, please.
Thank you. Just to go back a step there, Karen said, I think there was a personal one, decriminalise all drugs. The stance of the Christian People's Alliance would not be to decriminalise the use of drugs. We would be against legalising all of the drugs, but my point was to make it fairer on the youth and not make it last a long time for the penalty. Now, wealth tax was mentioned, and yet the Christian People's Alliance is not wanting to steal money off the rich. That doesn't create wealth over the whole country. What we are proposing is a turnover tax that will target specifically the largest companies in the world that pay absolutely no tax in Great Britain. And that's the difference, is if they want to leave this country, someone else will take over from Google or Facebook. There's plenty of others that will take there. So they will pay their 5%, and that will generate funds that are needed for all of the things that everyone's talked about. And as for oil companies, there was talk of a stealth tax there to tax them for the windfall that they've made. If anyone's owned oil shares over the last 20 years, there's been years where they've made no money. So any industry that sits it out through the low years, I don't think they should be penalised. We should do a tax that's fair, and that's what the Christian People's Alliance is about, is being fair on business, because we want businesses here. I just want to point out that I am not the candidate for Leeds South. Janet Bickerdike is the candidate standing there, and she's standing for Christian People's Alliance. I have made some personal comments of my own, but hopefully I put across some Christian principles there as well. We want the country to go back to moral policies like we had back in the 60s. Not everything, but definitely get away from these policies that are destroying this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daryl. And Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I just say how very civilised this conversation between the candidates has been, and how interesting it's been as well. There is much common ground, and Hilary and I had a brief conversation before this about the good work that is done in the House of Commons when people are working together. Most of the people who go into politics are good people with a good heart. They come from different places. I think you once said about your father, Hilary, I'm a Ben, but not a Benite. They come from different places, but they have good values that are intended to do well for our society. And so for everybody here, can I just say thank you for standing, because that is a real service to our democracy. As Hilary said earlier, it's really important to vote. I don't care whether you vote for me or him or Ed or Daniel or Daryl, but please go and vote. People have died so that you can have a vote. Going back to serious politics, none of the rest of them, apart from my party, can say who's going to pay for all this. So I appreciate, and you'll have heard that I understand the social stuff, but really we have as a nation to make a decision about how we're going to pay for it. And I would also like to commend to you Rishi Sunak, who is a man of great integrity and has been let down by some other people who are not. But Rishi is a man you can count on. He's amazing. He's very clever, and he is a man of integrity. He didn't need to do this, but his idea of public service is that he will do it. So please, can you vote for me?
Thank you, Karen. And that is the end.
Point out,
oh, go ahead,
Karen
Daryl.
just said, can I just point out that Karen was just saying she doesn't care who people vote for, whether it's her or others, Daniel or Daryl. I just point out once again, I'm not standing in your area. It's Janet Bickerdike. So don't go looking for my name. Janet Bickerdike from Christian People's Alliance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daryl, for clearing that up. So that is the end of the hustings for the election 2024. Thank you to the candidates who turned up and spoke and answered the questions. South Leeds Live is a community newspaper. You can find on the website where to sponsor and subscribe. And on this very, very warm evening, we'll say good night. Thank you.